I'm going to do a little bit of initial block prep on this 347 project, and thought maybe I'd show a little bit of what I plan on doing. You want to make sure that you check every single surface for burrs. Actually, I can feel one right there. If you hear that, you can use your fingernails just like I did. Hear that? There's a burr right there from somewhere, probably from handling. You know, this block's been sitting around. You know, maybe I set something on it or whatever, and you never want to take it for granted that you don't have a burr someplace. And the worst place to have one would be where your bearing shells are going to be. But all these surfaces, top surface where the actual main cap registers, this surface here, all along here. Now usually the main bearing shell only comes maybe out to here, but still I always make sure there's no burr on there at all. And of course on your thrust it's going to wrap all the way around, so it's even more critical not to have any burrs anywhere along there. But that's very important. No burrs anywhere. Another thing you want to do, each one of these tang slots, that's the slot that the tang for your main insert goes into. You want to make absolutely certain they're completely clean. I usually use one of these orange sticks like I use on carburetors. They come in really handy for this sort of thing. They don't scratch anything up, and they don't take out any material, but they do take out any dirt that might be in there. So hit each one of these tangs. I know for a fact these are clean, but if you have an engine block that maybe you got who knows, out of a junkyard or something, you'd be surprised at the crap that builds up into there. Do that for every one of them. If you don't do that, then there's a good possibility that that tang can hold up out of the bore a little bit, or out of the tang slot, and it could grab that insert and possibly cause a spun bearing. And I don't seem to have I've got a round stone around here somewhere. I can't seem to find it. I'm gonna have to probably buy another one, but you can rough this down along this edge with the rat tail file, but they're awful aggressive, so I don't like really using them. But as long as you're careful that you're not trying to really do too much, I'm not putting any pressure on there. I'm just basically taking that edge off and nothing else. And then you definitely want to dress that up with a round stone. Like I said, I can't seem to find mine, but and then, like I said, along here, you take like just a regular bastard file, and you hit that edge. I know for a fact that right there I've got a little bit of a burr. Take that down. And then it's always good to keep a little bit of fingernail. I like to keep mine cut because they get caught on things, but when it comes to something like this, it's good to have a little bit of fingernail because you can really feel that burr. But you want to check that all the way around, and then even back in here where the main cap registers. And then it's not a bad idea to take a little fine stone and go across here just to see if there's any high spots that show up. If there are any, you want to take them down. I don't know if you can see there, and it gets a little bit shiny around the bolt hole, but not too much. And then just keep feeling along. Do that with every one of them. Might be able to use this to get this down good enough to demonstrate putting that insert in. course, whenever you clean these, you always want to use some sort of detergent. Otherwise, if you just use a totally dry rag or a rag with, say, brake cleaner on it, you never get all of the grit out of there. And this is nothing more than just a preliminary clean, just so I can get an insert in there without having dirt in it. Obviously, this is no final cleaning. But if you never put a main bearing insert in, this is how you want to do it. Get it started in the tab, make sure it's in the tab, and then just roll it right around like that, and you're in. And of course, it's pretty tight to get back out, and that's what you want. You want the preload on that. Another thing it's not a bad idea to do is to go on the back side of this bearing with, this here happens to be a fine Arkansas stone. Actually, the reason why I'm using this is because I dropped it and it broke. That's what I used to use for sharpening my knives. But it works really well. All you want to do is just hit, you don't want to like scrub at it or anything. Just go across the back and see if you raise any big shiny spots. Especially pay attention like around the groove for the oil hole and around the edge, because just like I've said in my other video, you never trust these things are perfect, or that anything for that matter is perfect. It may have been perfect when it was originally made, and then somebody at some point dropped it, put a big burr in the back of it, who knows. And obviously I'm not doing anything more than just hitting this lightly with a very fine, this is a fine, very fine Arkansas stone, one like you'd put a keen edge on a knife. So, obviously I'm not taking any material out to speak of at all, just basically shining up any high spots. Now I know the back side of that bearing is good, and it's not a bad idea to run your fingers along the front side either. There's obviously no burrs on that. And then also, right here, across the parting line there. Because of course that has to mate up with the other bearing insert. Being careful, of course, not to mark this up in this area here. You wouldn't think it would really matter much, but you're talking, I take my measurements within tenths of thousandths, 10,000ths of an inch, and that little tiny burr can definitely make a difference on either being good or bad. But anyways, you do the same thing to the main cap as well. And then go through a similar procedure on the deck for the heads. Make sure you've got no burrs there. And then also, while you're at it, right along the oil pan rail, and then the front cover, and just about anywhere else that there's a mating surface, even on the oil filter mount, because any burr can be the possibility of a leak or a misalignment somewhere. And then after all that's done, now, like I said, this is all preliminary work. This will all happen again right before this engine goes together, but I always do this early on so I can get my various clearances and dimensions. You also want to clean out the threads in your block. Definitely, especially for the main bearing caps, and then also for the heads, which I use studs in both. But if you're definitely if you're using head bolts and main studs, it's extremely important to get these clean. There's a little bit of controversy on what to use to do that. People sell special thread chasers, which I've got an example here. Now this particular example is for a spark plug, one for 14 millimeter, one for an 18 millimeter. I bought this one time, long time ago. I was working, I think it was my sister's car. She had a 82 Thunderbird with a 3.8 V6, and somebody previously had cross-threaded the back, I think passenger side spark plug, and kind of chewed the threads up. And this kind of saved the day. I can only get that spark plug in halfways until I used this, and then I was able to get it all the way in, and it probably wasn't the best, but it got her through. So, but these are all right, but they charge way too much money for them, in my opinion. These are usually $20 or $30 each, even for, say, a 1/4 inch or a 7/16 or 1/2 inch, like you would use on, say, an oil pan rail or on main or head studs. And generally, I end up using a tap. And just a couple other things. These lifter bores, it's always a good idea to get your fingers down in there, feel around for any burrs, just in case, you never know. I did actually have a 351 Cleveland block once that at some point something must have fallen on top of here. I had one lobe that it didn't actually totally fail, but it kind of flattened out slightly. I couldn't understand why, and I started looking, and actually this here was dented in some. I actually had to take a little bit of a flap wheel and kind of grind that out some, well, polish it out some, so that the lifter, we're talking about flat tappet solid cam, the lifter was able to rotate like it should, and that cured that problem. It was probably a little bit loose on the top, but the rest of it probably supported it good enough. But that's something to keep an eye on, because you never know, something dropped on there. I don't know how that ever happened or what happened. It might have been whenever I ended up getting the cylinders. Actually, I had, at that particular block, if I remember right, I had to have a sleeve put in it. That might have been when it happened. Maybe somebody dropped something on it, or who knows. But just another thing to look at. To get all this gasket material and junk off of there, there's a plug underneath there, an oil plug. Always pop them out. Pop out every single oil plug in the whole block. Otherwise, there's always a place somewhere where dirt could lie. And at the same time, even though these cam bearings are actually pretty nice shape, I'll pop them out, put new ones in there too, because you really can't be certain that you get every bit of dirt out from behind that lip at each lube hole. So I always pop the cam bearings out too, and of course each one of the plugs for the oil gallery holes, and I always stake them in, glue them in good with a good locking sealer, and stake them in. That's the last thing you want to have come out of your engine. And of course all the other gasket material and everything needs scraped off of here. Quite a bit of work to do on that. And need to get these head dowels off. They're getting kind of rusty. This whole doggone block is getting rusty, unfortunately, but just more work for me to do. I just thought I'd show some of this. Quite a bit of prep work to do just to even start, let alone actually put the thing back together. So just a few other things to keep in mind.